Hey students, welcome to episode 45 of the Film Student Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Lazzeroni. I have yet another teacher for you to get to know this week, and like the others, this one was a really fun conversation. My guest this week is Second City's head of advanced improvisation, Rachael Mason, who taught our comedic literature and improv classes at HRFS. She is also one half of the improv duo The Boys, and I haven't told her this yet, but they were actually the first show I ever saw at Second City when I visited Chicago back in 2015. We talk about Rachel's crazy trip through nearly every job at Second City, the only time she's ever been starstruck. We talk about her amazingly artistic family and her time working with the USO. On with the show.
I grew up on Long Island in a town called Babylon. And if you are familiar with like Robert Moses and Jones Beach and Fire Island, that's where the bridge to those places are. So it's like a summer town. Mm-hmm. And I have a very musical family. Like my great-grandma was an opera singer who sang at La Scala. Oh, wow. My mother and father both play instruments. My mother is a music teacher and a piano teacher and a guitar teacher. My brother sang at the Metropolitan Opera. So we were like that family that could sing in harmony at Christmas and annoy the fuck out of everybody.
You would actually caroling on Christmas, yeah.
So I often say like how I got started in comedy was by realizing if I was funny enough to entertain the old Italian men playing Set the Meds, which is 7.5, it's like 21. But like if I was funny enough, they would let me stay there and entertain them while my brother and sister were already up in bed like 2 hours ago. So like work in a room was like a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like doing jokes and like
you had your pay that you were getting out of the experience.
Like my father put me on the table and I do Mae West when I was like 6 years old. I had no idea. Like, why don't you come up and see me sometime? So, right, my father used me as a prop. So I started doing all the plays and all the shows in community theater, and I got the lead in things and like started, you know, I auditioned for Annie on Broadway.
Oh,
like
wow.
My generation was like, let's be Annie. And
what role?
Annie.
For
and
Annie?
Sarah Jessica Parker got it that year, and I've still not forgiven her. And then I wanted to go to a liberal arts college, so I picked Skidmore, and Skidmore is the home of the National College Comedy Festival, and my improv troupe and the festival were both founded by David Miner. Okay. And David Miner, you know, produces Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Parks and Rec, right? Like he's huge. So he brought incredible people into my school. Yeah. To like teach us about improv. And I started going, where did you come from? Yeah. And they were like, Chicago. Yeah. So me and my entire improv troupe moved here basically together. We all slept on floors until we found apartments. We all auditioned for Second City. I think 7 of us came here, but only 2 of us actually got in to the conservatory. And I'm the only one who actually got hired. Yeah. So I like worked in the box office, and because I was in the box office, I got a BizCo like the first year I was here because I was around, and I started doing all the classes at the same time. IO, Second City, and Annoyance all at the same time. Like, because I was like, I'm fucking doing this. So like
because
my brain
if you're going to binge hard.
Right? And I would not recommend that to anyone. Like the contradictions between the theaters, like we said, they're very different philosophies. So like my brain melted because I couldn't figure out that there wasn't one way to do it. Right. That there is the style of the theater and your point of view and how do you bend it.
And even the direction
style.
of what you're trying to end up creating in the end of it.
Sketch here, pure improv there. Yeah. Anything goes here, right? Short form here. Yeah. So I started like hustling and like waiting tables in box office. And the more I was around, the more I started meeting people and, hey, why don't you be in this troupe? Or we're short tonight. I know you're waiting tables, but do you want to play with us? Yeah. So I started like getting asked to do things. And I was on Baby Wants Candy, which was a famous team. And like, you know, SNL would come in just to see Baby Wants Candy. Yeah. Or Jane, the first all-female team. Like it was a big deal back then for an all-female team. So I started performing, then I started coaching, then I started teaching. Then I got hired to tour at Second City. And I worked almost every job in this building, from producer to director to box office to finance to like producer's assistant, right? And then I got married and I thought I needed to settle down. And that's when I really ran Sharna's training center, like, right? right? And then I had a baby, and I realized I needed a real job because babies are a black hole you pour money into.
Yep, basically.
And I went to advertising. I went to work at a friend's advertising firm. And when they discovered I was creative, like they would all come over to the finance department and be like, can you punch up this script for me? And then I have never made so much money in my life, but I fucking hated it.
Yeah.
And it was soul sucking. And I came back to Chicago and I ran into Norm Holly. This advertising firm was in New York. Mm-hmm. I had a 4-month-old at home. I was FedExing frozen breast milk back home and going like chemically crazy, like pumping in my manager's office. It was fucking horrible. So I came home and Norm Holly was like, come home.
Yeah.
And got me hired back at Second City teaching 5 classes so I could like support myself. Then I was offered head of advanced improvisation. Mm-hmm. And I was like, as a woman in comedy, how could I not like get a legitimate say I need to take this job?
Yeah.
Then I got offered head of A through E. So now I'm head of all improvisation.
Yeah.
But don't forget, I did a tour co for 5 years. I did a boat. I was understudy on main stage and ETC many times. Like I think I teach at the Harold Ramis Film School because I have that breadth of experience. I've been on a film set. I have directed improv to sketch to film. Mm-hmm. I have been an actor. I've been a director. I've been a script writer for the people.
Yeah.
It like, you know, that saying like actors always want to direct. I think there's something to knowing about the risk you are asking your actor to take, right? Or knowing when you're a writer that your shit's going to transform in your actor's hands, right? Like I feel like I have a good sense of all of that.
Right. It helps to go do the other roles because that was something when I
That's
when
the
I came
perk
in,
of this school.
Yeah, when I came into the school, I had only ever really been on my own sets. I'd always been directing, so I didn't know how to be, you know, plug-in person in this role on this set.
And you got to be if you want to make money in this business.
Yeah, and so I was like, that's one thing. So I just hit the ground running and just did as many other projects as I could to help other people with their things. And it was interesting going and doing producing the last couple terms and then taking back what I learned from producing back to directing because it's stuff that I had never really engaged with and on the producing side of it because I'd always had other people that were doing that, and so I now direct differently from what I learned from that.
You know what your producer has to pull off to make it able for you to do that.
Yeah, and I also know what a producer is capable of pulling off, and to know like, oh, this is not something I need to shoulder in this role. I can get somebody else to take it on. So there's something to be said for jumping over to a different role just for the experience of having done that. Agreed. And it'll make you better at your role for it.
Not to mention, when they told me the class I was going to be teaching, improv for the filmmaker, I was like, hell yes, we do improv to sketch. Film seems like, you know, like adaptation seems like the next logical step. But then they threw me a bone of another class, Comedic Literature. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you know, instead of like great films, great comedy films, we want them to read the great comedic literature. And I was like, you mean I get to design the class of my dreams? For real? Like if I wasn't teaching this class, I would take this class? Yeah. And I got to like, I mean, you've taken my class. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was the class of my dreams.
I can tell you showed up excited for every single class on a level of like, I get to tell you about this now, and mixed with a healthy aspect of fuck you if you don't agree with me. It was a nice little pairing there.
It's more like fuck you if you don't match my energy level. I don't care if you don't agree with me, but prove why.
It was the cheese to go with the wine. It was the cheese to go with the wine. But no, that class is awesome because it is about trying to expose to different types of content, different styles of putting things together, and stuff that if you don't like, I'm not that I never would have read Roxanne Gay, but I probably wouldn't have, in part because I'm not a big reader, frankly. Like if I read something, I'm going to read a script or a magazine or articles.
I mean, me too.
More than a book, you know?
Yep.
That's just my personal bent on things. But that was really interesting, and it was really
and remember,
it was a great voice to hear.
So not only is it a great voice to hear, right? Like a voice we're not typically exposed to. Some of those chapters could be adapted to movies, like the Scrabble chapter, and then other chapters are like the best research material, the best focus group material research you could ever aggregate. Right, about complicated protagonists and happy endings and unlikable women. Right, she her book demands a higher quality from movies. She calls out Hollywood.
Yeah,
and I fucking love that because we're at the point of where we're like, what should we make for Hollywood? And she's like, whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
And stand by it.
Yeah.
Back it up. Prove it. I love her. I once did a thing called Literary Deathmatch.
What is
Susan
that?
Messing was supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And she, I'm the poor man Susan Messing. Whenever Susan can't do it, they ask me next. And the Literary Deathmatch. So first of all, the live lit scene in Chicago is huge. And I did not know that I would be in the heat of it. I think his name is Adrian. It starts with an A, the guy who set it up. If you look it up, it's they have it all over the world.
Okay.
They bring in the most famous authors to read scripts, and they have 3 comedy judges with Nerf guns who get to, when time is up, you get to fire. If you don't like something, you get to fire. And so I can't remember Major Jackson was one of them. Roxanne Gay was the other one, and I can't remember the third author, but he had worked at Skidmore, and I had met him there. I fucking fired 12 darts at Roxanne Gay. And I think part of the reason I put it in the curriculum was to apologize. I love you and I love your writing and I will never forgive myself. I fired them sideways, not looking. I couldn't. I was the only person in the room, literally the only person in the room who didn't have a book on the New York Times bestseller list. And I meet a guy.
That means
this guy.
You're the only one who has a completely open perspective on it of being an outside reader in those cases.
The one guy I recognized from Skidmore, he's standing with another guy, and I'm like, I think I know you. He goes, you probably know me from a book jacket. And I was like, no, I know you. Did you visit Skidmore? And he goes, yeah, I was there to visit my friend Stephen Millhauser. And I was like, I was in an office with you and Stephen Millhauser talking about a short story I wrote that Millhauser said was one of the most fucked up stories he'd ever read, and compared me to some author that I didn't know. And when I read her book, I was like, oh no, I can't believe he compared me to her.
What was the story? Do you remember?
Oh my God. Well, it was about 4 people in a car who had taken acid. Okay. And all the stoplights were red, so they just kept going, and they go swimming naked in the Hudson River because I was in upstate New York. It's whatever. It's trashy college writing, And he just called me out on it. He goes, if you want to write this, look at how this broad did it. Yeah. And it's so funny that a guy was like, you know me from my book jacket. And I was like, no. I've literally fucking met you, dude. You know me from my book jacket.
Well, and you have I appreciate, I think that we both have some similar sensibility in so much as how to handle celebrity to a certain degree. It's
Second City helps you deal with that.
Yeah, but also they're just people.
So that's being a New Yorker and being our personality type. I treat the sound guy like I treat Tom Hanks. We are all people and all of us are making this thing together. Right? Let's be humans. Although I have noticed at a certain level, some celebrities get shell-shocked by their celebrity. Yeah. Mike Myers now likes a wall around him, and Dave Koechner is afraid of groups of men who want to frat boy out over him. So I get the withdrawal that some celebrities the walls they put up because people feel like they own them. But when people come back to Second City, Martin Short will just be walking around the hallway, and you're like, hey, Martin Short. Yeah. Or whatever, or if Tom Hanks shows up to do the set, he's more nervous than you. Because he's like, I'm going to improvise and everyone thinks I'm funny. And then he slays and you're like, fuck you, Tom Hanks. Of course you're fucking hilarious and you're going to slay.
But yeah, and but at the end of it, they are people. It's not so over the top. And so it's funny listening to you talk about some of the experiences from auditioning for things and that sort of thing, and just the people that you've encountered, and you're just very nonchalant about it. And it's not it never strikes me as a name drop of guess who I met. You're because you'll just be like, fucking Sarah Jessica Parker. It's wait, what? there's a reverence to go along
starstruck.
with it.
I'll tell you about the only time I was ever starstruck. It's when I was working at the advertising firm in New York City. A friend of mine had sold some code to Google and bought a Greystone on like Bleecker Street.
Okay.
Like Bob Dylan lives over
Yeah.
here, and Elvis Costello lives over here.
Okay.
I'm trying to open my umbrella, and I slam right into Elvis Costello. And like I can't open my umbrella, and I see him, and we look at each other, and he sees that I see who he is.
Yeah.
And I think I am saying, "Oh my God, Mr. Costello, are you okay? I'm such a big fan." But instead, I go, "Huh?" And he looks at me, and he goes, "Are you all right?" And I think I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to open my umbrella." And I go, "Huh?" And he goes, "All right then," and walks away. And I was like, "Fuck!" Like I've never and I've met so many celebrities, but like just that one moment where I was like,
what is it about Elvis Costello? Because I follow
I'm sure I would do
of,
the same thing with David Bowie. I don't know.
I follow a handful of New York people, because when you're in DC,
You bump into people in New York all the time.
Yeah, well, and I've Facebook chatted with a few. Connor Ratliff is one of my favorites up there. Shannon O'Neill, I follow.
They're the best.
I love the Chris Gethard show. So the thing that was and Stepfathers and Ask Cat 3000 and all that stuff. But they are. I know I lost my train of thought of where I was going. I just started listing off New York people,
Celebrities in New York.
Yeah. So in DC, you end up following all these people, and I've seen where Connor Ratliff's like a huge Elvis Costello fan. It's interesting specifically that celebrity tie-in that's one that sticks out for improvisers as like somebody to get.
That dude is so hardcore. He quit his recording contract because they were like, "We only want you to make an album every 3 years, so it'll be a big deal." And he was like, "Fuck you, I want to make music when I want." So he like ditched a $1 million recording contract, formed his own company, and now releases music whenever he fucking wants.
Yeah.
And there was like
he's ahead of the curve, because that's the thing that everybody's doing now. I mean, Beyonce and Taylor Swift and all those. That whenever they want to drop music, they will.
Streaming website and internet service before anyone knew what it was.
Yeah. Just see the road ahead, figure out what you need, and just have it. Yeah. But so talking about this program, what have you seen come through so far that's really impressed you or intrigued you for where it could go in the future?
Well, it's weird. This is going to sound like not a compliment, but it's a compliment. I'm constantly amazed how quickly our students are able to pull together amazing things. This is a very fast program where we treat you like professionals and expect you to have something at the end. And I'm always amazed when you do. I'm like, "Oh shit, you did it." Like if we told you how hard it was at the beginning, which I'm doing right now, you might be like, "Oh no." But you're like, "Oh shit, I made this movie. I fucking made this movie."
Yeah.
And the screening at the ArcLight is always like, "Oh my God, there's my movie on the screen." And they're always great. And you watch people like, "Oh, I'm terrible, and my movie is terrible, and I wish I could cut it again." And the movies are great.
I can think of at least one student that you just did a wonderful impression of from this term. She actually apologized to me the other day for. She's like, "I'm sorry for dumping all that."
We're all artists. We get it. We get it. I am proud of all the kids who have gotten hired. I'm proud of all the kids who are in film festivals now. Like, we just want you to make a final film, but some of these films are so good, like they're getting into festivals.
Yeah.
And they're getting recognition and getting people jobs.
Yeah. And all the more reason I'm an advocate for that. One thing they tried to push us towards was like, don't spend a ton of money on these. Don't try and put like a ton of resources into them beyond, what you can beg, borrow, and steal.
Was it Tangerine?
Yeah,
right. Was made on a fucking cell phone.
I shot my documentary on a cell phone and had a company that picked it up for a streaming channel, and the streaming channel already folded, so it doesn't matter. But I shot it on an iPhone, and it still.
The first TV series I booked folded because the producer absconded with the money.
Lovely. What was that one?
It was called Possible Side Effects. I was a female head writer and only female cast member. And it was a sketch comedy show that aired after the Howard Stern show on CBS at like 1:00 in the morning. And we shot 6 episodes, 3 of them aired, and then our pay started to slow down. And it was like, why didn't we get paid? And then we found out the producer literally disappeared with the budget of the show.
How does
well? So that to me I not only did I go back to my high school bar and buy a round, which was like $3,000.
Yeah.
I like when you get it, you don't know that you really got it.
Right.
Like even if I got picked up, well, it folded, or I finally got a TV show. The producer stole all the money. Right. My series was renewed for a second season, but it may not be renewed for a third.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's always that like pragmatic optimism we need to have.
Mm-hmm. With
right?
the impending dread to go along with it for what the next step's going to be after that.
My husband says I'm the worst because I always prepare for the worst case scenario, knowing that if it's better than that, like, yay, it can only go up for there. But he's like, that's a lot of energy you're spending preparing for a lot of different outcomes.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm in the same boat, though, because I'm so you ever taken like one of those Myers-Briggs tests?
No.
Okay.
Because I know what it would tell me.
So I wound up taking one with my last job, and it was the one that's about like organization versus chaos. I forget which one it is on the actual
You're making
sheet.
me want to look it up.
I'd have to look it up, but I was so far into the organization field on this one that I actually looped back into chaos. Basically, is how it worked out.
That's crazy.
But it's because I worked for Apple for 8 years, so I learned to prepare for chaos.
Inspector, counselor, mastermind, giver, provider, idealist, supervisor,
so those are all
visionary,
the types.
Right?
But I'm looking for the breakdown because there's four scales back and forth, and it's one of those, and it's the. But it's like organization versus chaos is the gist of it.
I love you, and all the way back to chaos. So time is a flat circle. History doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes. Like the pendulum swung so far, it went all the way back.
But it was and it was basically this that I would prepare for chaos, and so I got to the point where I almost preferred chaos because I was always the most prepared for it.
Do right.
Yeah, like I was, and so if it's not chaotic,
you're going to be a good parent.
Maybe one day we shall see. But no, like it's interesting trying to be that way, trying to handle. I'm always seeking out chaos in some cases.
I will fully compare it to parenting.
Yeah.
Right? There's your kid sitting on the floor. If you leave the room, they could right? Roll off the couch, stick a fork in an outlet, eat something, right? Like when you come back in the room, you have to be prepared to like pull something out of a mouth or like bandage a head.
There's something terrible could be happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's I've heard plenty of horror stories from friends of mine with kids of just like I looked over and he was standing at the top of the stairs and about to teeter over and just like reach out and grab him.
I think I've told you this story that my kid is in his kiddie chair. He's eating and he goes, I need ketchup. And I go into the other room to get ketchup and I come back in and he's on the floor about to stick a fork in an outlet. And I laughed because I was like, this only happens in cartoons. And it was like 3 fucking seconds that I was out of the room.
They move quick.
Oh my God, babies, man.
They're quick. They quickly seek death.
Fucking babies.
They rapidly seek it out.
There, but for the grace of God, goes any baby. We are all lucky to be alive. Babies are actively trying to kill themselves.
Yes.
My cousin has twins. And I'm sitting with her on the couch once, and without even looking, she does like a no-look behind the back grab of one of her twins who's about to dive backwards off the couch without looking. Like, she's just talking to me. Like, she can, like, here's the bottle, right? And, like, I don't know how she does it. I don't know how anyone has more than one child, actually.
So my buddy and his wife, they had 3 kids. They'd always wanted a big family, but after some complications with the first 3, she was told, okay, you can probably do 1 more. So they get pregnant again, twins. So they have 3 children under 6 and 2 infant twins. And she still goes
they are
running
American
every
heroes.
day. And,
she's an American hero.
And her Instagram is one of my favorite things to follow because it shows her just like trying to do like a workout in the house or something like that, and seeing like just the chaos of all these
hanging
little
from a chandelier.
I haven't seen that yet, but it could very well happen.
My brother has twins, and there's this great video of one of his twins like singing "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow" in front of a tree, and then the other twin like peeks out from behind the tree and is like making faces and doing bits behind her. It's the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And she's not trying to make fun of her sister. She's just like trying to do bits.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like they figured out if she makes people laugh, she gets to stay up 2 hours later.
These fucking twins, so they're identical.
Yeah.
So they get a lot of work. They're child actors because children under a certain age, you have to flop them out.
Yeah, because they can't work.
So the two things they have done are the post. So they worked with Oscar winner Meryl Streep. And the other one they did was, oh God, was it Succession or Billions, where they had to sit on John Malkovich's lap. So they have only worked with Oscar winners. These two little precious identical twins.
Yeah.
They have a better agent and a better resume than I do in this business 20 years.
That's the frustrating part.
The crazy part is that's how me and my sister started as child actors.
Oh,
We're
really?
Irish twins, but when we were little, we looked almost exactly alike.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of work together, either as twins or replacing each other.
Yeah. So what does your sister do?
So all of us sort of went into the arts.
Yeah.
My brother is a world famous
given your
tattoo
family background,
artist.
sounds like a thing.
My brother's a world famous tattoo artist who was first in his class at Parsons School of Design, and my sister, who has a degree in early childhood development, does arts therapy for developmentally disabled children.
Okay.
So all three of us, my poor parents, make a living in the arts, but using arts for good or whatever.
Yeah, some sort of social angle to go along with it, which I appreciate. That was one of the things I loved about. You followed Participant Media at all? And so they're a production company that all the things that they produce have some sort of a social project to go alongside them.
That is hot.
And so they've got
Say the name again.
Participant Media. So they did An Inconvenient Truth. They did Lincoln. They did Food Inc. They did.
Oh my God, I love them.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that they're attached to or behind, and every single one of them has some sort of social project to go along with it. Which was, sometimes it's for Food Inc. I want to say it was something about food education for. I don't know. I'd have to look them up, but so if you go to their website, you can actually see the projects that go along with each of those.
We talked a lot about this in our class. Satire is supposed to change the thing. It's satirizing, or at least get people to think about why it's the way it is. And I don't always get sometimes I just have to do comedy. So when when my satire is social, to experience political, to get that activist part of me out, I'll go and volunteer. I'll work with nurses or I'll work with veterans. That makes me feel like I'm contributing.
Yeah.
If I can't really contribute. I had the opportunity to work for the USO as a comedian.
Oh, that's cool.
And I feel like this sounds weird and I'm not this kind of person, but there's no, as a citizen who's a comedian, there's no higher way to serve, right? Than making those poor kids, those scared kids laugh.
Yeah. That's awesome. When I wrote my initial thing coming in, the comedic influences paper that I had to do, mine was on John Candy and Robin Williams, who did a ton of those USO shows.
Yeah.
And so
they're
it's always
life-changing.
interesting. Yeah. Every comedian that I've seen that goes and does them, I mean, even if they're uber political and against everything that's going on.
Yeah, fuck our government, but I love our troops, man. Yeah. Right?
I mean, hearing Louis Black go over there, who's done nothing but angry comedy.
Kathy
and goes
Griffin
over and comes back.
went to the Middle East.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that sounds right. But it's impressive. And that's cool. So what were you doing for USO? Was it improv shows or was it
sketch comedy?
Okay.
Mine is a rare case. We were in Alaska doing a USO tour, of military and naval, but any base, right? We did a Coast Guard base, a military, a Army base, a Navy base, in September 2001.
Oh, wow.
And we had a show scheduled September 10th. Mm-hmm. The show was amazing. We went out and fucking partied all night. In fact, my friend Celeste was wearing a soldier's uniform, and we were so drunk when we got back to the kitchen, like trying to make pancakes. Mm-hmm. And we put on the news in time to see the second plane hit. Mm-hmm. And I was so hungover, and a New Yorker who knew my dad was in the city that day, I immediately started throwing up. Yeah. And was like, what the fuck is happening? And because I was on a military base, like we thought World War III was happening. Like I saw F-16 scramble, right? I can see Russia from my house. Like we saw fucking planes take off. And the base commander was like, we're postponing the show. Like we're not doing the show tonight. September 12th happens. The base is like on lockdown. We're not allowed to leave. We get search going in and out of buildings. Yeah. September 13th happens, and the base commander comes to us and says, please do a show. These kids are like, they need to laugh right now. Yeah. So we had been given some very strict rules from the USO, like no sex, no politics, no drugs, no rock and roll. And the base commander sort of lifted that requirement and said, please just make them laugh. Yeah. So we wrote scenes about them, and we wrote scenes about the base and the KP and like, or KPX or whatever it's whatever. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry. And we put on the show. Yeah. But the hard part about this show is because the base was active, our audience was holding live firearms. Now, I don't mean they were pointing them at us. Right, they just had them, which is a little scary when you're like, I hope we don't bomb.
They don't have Rotten Tomatoes.
Right? So after the show...
You're thinking, can I go to the mess hall and get some Rotten Tomatoes and bring those in so they have
cabbage,
an alternative?
Right? Can they put the guns on the floor and just hold cabbage like Shakespeare's groundlings? So after the show, like we're all crying in the audience, like everyone's like, oh my God, we did it. And holy shit. And I'm still worried about my family who I can't reach. Yeah. And the base commander comes to us, and this base, like you get coins for doing certain things. Yeah. And I'm going to cry. The base commander gave us each a coin. Mm-hmm. And that night, well, it's to fuck us. The last person to put their coin out has to buy the round. Yeah. So we ended up buying like
service coins. I've had a couple of friends that have gotten them.
We ended up buying all the rounds because we forgot about our service coins. Yeah. And to this day, it is one of my most treasured possessions. Yeah. And it's in my jewelry box. And whenever I open that box, I'm like, I help some of those kids like not be scared for a second. Yeah. I feel the same way when I volunteer at Gilda's Club. Mm-hmm. Like for a second, these women aren't thinking about their cancer. Yeah. They're just thinking about like what letter of the alphabet comes next because we're playing the alphabet game. Yeah. Like if I can give them relief for a minute, like Viola Spolin said, right? Like Neva Boyd and Jane Addams, right? Mm-hmm. Like the roots of improv are in affecting social change. Mm-hmm. So we can literally use it for it or laterally use it for it to create satire. I love to literally use it. Yeah. Like I've told you in your class, like write a scene and like Katie Rich's scene about the auction and she donates the money to Planned Parenthood. Yeah. Brian Stack wrote a book, Brian Stack alumni, shout out, with the cast of Colbert about whose boat is this boat? Have you seen that? Yeah. Whose boat is this boat? They have raised over $1 million. Yeah. Off the proceeds from that stupid, hilarious fucking book. Yeah. There's nothing but Trump quotes pointing at a boat after the hurricane. Yeah. Whose boat is this boat?
But, well, in kind of final thoughts. So if somebody were considering coming here to go through this program and is on the fence and trying to decide whether or not to apply, whether or not they have the chops for it, what would you say to them?
So I always say New York and LA are product towns, and Chicago is a process town. Mm-hmm. And because nobody's looking at us, we can fail and make shit and try and experiment and become great. Mm-hmm. And that's why we kill when we go to New York and LA. If you come here, you will be given access to a pipeline that feeds directly into those places. And you will get to take incredible risk. Whether you want to make satire or comedy or something a little more pointed, like you will be able to make it here.
Yeah. Well, if people want to try and follow you on social media and see Major Tom and all the puppy photos, where
I have the cutest puppy in the world, and his name is Major Tom because I love David Bowie and I'm a nerd.
You were supposed to bring him along today.
I was supposed to. I
still have not met Major Tom.
So my kid isn't feeling well, and I left him at home to play with my kids.
I guess that's fine.
I think on Instagram I am Miss Rachael Mason. Let's see.
I love that you're looking at your Instagram chat.
Right? I am Miss Rachael Mason on Instagram. And on Twitter, I'm just Miss Mason.
Miss Mason. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
It was fun.
Bye.
And that was Rachael Mason. Thank you to Rachael and to the Harold Ramis Film School and the Second City staff for their help. The song on this week's episode was Interlude by Derek Evry. Find more of Derek's killer music at derekevry.com. That's DerekEvry. This show is recorded and edited by me, Tony Lazzeroni. If you want to hear more from me and my classmates, teachers, and a few special guests, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, send us an email at filmstudentpod@gmail.com or find us on Twitter and Instagram at filmstudentpod. And be sure to check out some of my and my classmates' work at filmstudentpod.com, where you can also find links to all of our past episodes. See you all next week. Class dismissed.